All right.
Ask me if they can hear you.
So, hello everybody. You can hear me? I hope you can. Okay, great. So, hello to everyone, and I'm very happy of welcoming you to this new Semiosalong series. And well, I just wanted to say a few words. First of all, that we are all very happy and excited of having this new meeting, because we have managed to gather a very nice team of semioticians and friends, and I can assure you that it is going to be a very memorable series. So you can actually watch the whole program of the series in our Facebook page. Maybe it is not already up, but it will be, and you can follow it there, because we already have the whole program for the whole series. We will have 4 sessions. So today Tyler and Ľudmila will be speaking, but then we will have 6 more semioticians, so 3 more sessions, and yeah, they will be great. So they will. and just very quickly about the topic of this Semiosalong. Originally, we wanted to have this topic for last semester series, but Tyler and I, we thought that it was not yet ready. So we had some discussions, and we finally proposed some points for our presenters to discuss and to think along with us. And yeah, we really hope that by the end of this series, we will gain some new insights and some new understandings about well, semiotics. So
and transmutation.
And transmutation, indeed. But basically, our concerns, they had to do with how to read semiology at the light of the current developments of semiotic theory. So how to provide a productive reading of the works of Saussure and Hjelmslev and Prieto and other semiologists, so-called. And of course, that made us rethink the place of language within other science systems. And so the role of transmutation is somewhere there. But I will not speak too much, because I will let our presenters tell us the whole story. So yeah, remember that we are going to have these sessions every Thursday, every second Thursday, at the same time, at 7 Tartu time. So yes, this session is being recorded. So if you turn on your camera, we will just take it for granted that you don't mind to be in the recording, unless you tell us otherwise. So yeah. And we will, you can ask questions to the presenters, but we will have them at the end. So we will have first the presentations, both presentations, and then at the end we will have the questions. But you can write them at the chat at any time, or yeah, if you want, you can turn on your mic and speak. And yes, so I think that is all on my side, and I will leave you with Ľudmila Lacková, who honored us with presenting today, and she's going to talk about form and substance, a non-orthodox reading of Hjelmslev's semiotics. So, Ľudmila, please.
Thank you very much, Israel. So can I share my screen?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, looks good.
Okay, so let me go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
So Israel already introduced the topic of the Semiosalong series, but I also prepared a very short introduction because I am currently at a Texas Tech University, the Paris Institute for Studies in Pragmatism, and I have here an access to also all manuscripts by Paris. So I scanned for you this entry from the Century Dictionary, this famous encyclopedia of which Peirce was one of the authors. As you know, after that, he lost his position at Johns Hopkins University. One of the few academic employment Peirce had was constructing entries for this encyclopedia. And this entry is, of course, for the Semiosalong topic. So the definition by Peirce of transmutation is that transmutation is simply a change into another substance, form, or nature. And here, form and substance are put together without any problem. As you know, for Peirce, the notions of form and substance were not that important, but it is the contrary case for the structuralist semiology. And actually, the whole topic of my presentation will be to question what happens with substance and what happens with form during the act of transmutation or translation. So you know that these notions come from Roman Jakobson, and he actually distinguished three types of translation. Transmutation is only one of the three types of semiotic translation for Jakobson. So he distinguished intralingual translation, which is rewarding, or an interpretation of verbal signs into other verbal sign within the very same language. Then he distinguished interlingual translation, or the translation proper. And the very last type of translation is the transmutation. And Jakobson's definition of transmutation is that it is an interpretation of verbal signs by means of sense of non-verbal sense systems. So it is obvious here that the role of logocentrism in transmutation is somehow crucial for Jakobson. And I have understood that the very goal of this Semiosalong is to question the role of logocentrism in transmutation. So I will also try to do so. But before I develop further on this topic, I have some examples for you of what actually translation and transmutation is. So interlingual translation is simply what you imagine by it, a translation from one language to another, for example, from English to Japanese. And I will give you more interlingual translation examples because most of all I'm a linguist and I work at the Department of General Linguistics. But what I want to say is that interlingual translation doesn't have to be necessarily limited to verbal language, but if we want to deliberate ourselves from the very logocentric definition by Jakobson, we can also say that there can be an interlingual translation in other semiotic systems. For instance, when we translate a visual sign into another visual sign. And this is my example of such an interlingual visual translation. It's a picture from an exhibition from Vienna Kunsthistorisches Museum. It was in 2018, from the times where museums were still open. And it was a very nice exhibition. The name was Shape of Time. And the main idea of this exhibition was to present couples of paintings or even statues or other pieces of art, and which express the very same topic or the same idea. And of course, as the name already tells it, Shape of Time, The main focus was on the comparison between ancient arts and modern or contemporary art. So, in this picture, you can see on the left side a painting by 16th century Italian painter Tintoretto, and it is entitled Susanna and the Elders. The painting narrates a biblical story from the book of Daniel, the story of Susanna, of this Jewish wife, as she was taking her bath in her garden, and the two elders was spying on her as she was having her bath.
Screenshot.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. And so the story goes on that the two elders feel lust for Susanna, and when she finishes her bath, they accost her, they demand her to have sex with them. And when she refuses, they decide to accuse her falsely from having sex with another young man in her garden. And the story finishes that the two elders are put to death and the virtue triumphs. So this is the moral of the story. And on the right part of the photo, you can see the transmutated or translated, let's say, version of the same idea, which is a spying on a naked woman taking a bath. So the curator of this exhibition decided to put the two paintings together because of sharing the very same motive. And of course, there are differences, for instance, and which is very interesting in this case, from the compositional or enunciative perspective. The Tintoretto's painting is approached from the third person perspective, while you can see the elders like from the third person viewpoint watching at Susanna. But in the second picture by Carrie James Marshall, the contemporary American artist, you can see the same motive from the first person perspective. And it is even emphasized by the fact that you can see the window frame like limiting the observer's viewpoint. Okay, so this was just to illustrate how actually an interlingual translation can exist even within the visual arts or within any kind of semiotic system. And staying in the very same topic, I have an example of a real transmutation, like the passing from one sense system to another sense system, and this is a poem by Wallace Stevens. And don't get confused by the title because Peter Quince is a character from Shakespeare, but actually this poem narrates the very story of Susanna and the others as represented in Tintoretto's painting. So I can just read the very beginning of the poem, the very few verses, because it's a very, very nice poem. Just as my fingers on these keys make music, so the self-same sounds on my spirit make music too. Music is feeling, then not sound, and thus it is what I feel here in this room, desiring you. Thinking of your blue-shadowed silk is music. It is like the strain walked in the elders by Susanna. And the poem goes on, narrating the very story of Susanna and the elders. It is a narrative poem, but of course, the very idea of the poem goes beyond the pure story, the biblical story. And actually, the main idea of the poem is to express what beauty is, and that beauty is not something abstract or platonic, but Stevens says that a beauty is momentary in the mind. And this is an added value to the biblical story, This is an added value which the transmutated result of the transmutation brings. And well, this is my idea, and I will conclude my presentation with a try to theoretically substantiate the claim that during the translation or even transmutation, a new signification is created. And to conclude this part, one more literary example from the same topic. This is my very most favorite novel by Robbe-Grillet, Jealousy, and we can comprehend it as a literary transmutation of the second painting by Kerry James Marshall, because actually the novel Jealousy is narrated from the first person perspective, and the motive is still the same, spying on a beautiful woman. And in this case, in this novel, the spying or the observer's viewpoint is somehow emphasized by the fact that he is observing through the window blinds, which is similar to the frame of the window from the painting of Marshall. So this is a perfect example of the transmutation of the visual into narrative. In fact, Robbe-Grillet's novels are often described as visual, and it is because of it lacks the very plot. There is no plot, just the narrative transmutation of the visual. So as I already mentioned, well, my idea is that during the translation or transmutation, there is always something lost, but also, on the other hand, something new is created. Some words are untranslatable from one language to another. And this is, of course, why we also have the figure of speech lost in translation. And my question is, like, what is lost and what is created, how we can approach this theoretically, how it can be described with a theoretical semiotic background. So finally, I can go into the very topic of my presentation, to the Danish linguist Louis Hjelmslev. And if you don't know him, I can just say a few words about him. So he was the founder of the so-called Linguistic Circle of Copenhagen, or Copenhagen Language School. And he named his linguistic theory as glossematics. Is in any other structuralist movement in linguistics. Also, glossematics was inspired by Ferdinand de Saussure, and Hjelmslev is famous mostly for his re-elaboration or extension of the original Saussurean sign model. From the original two components of the sign model by de Saussure, which are signifier and signified, Hjelmslev made four components of his sign model. It is not actually a sign model, but it is more like model of the whole linguistic system. But still, we have the four basic components: expression, content, and substance, form. I don't want to go very deeply in the theory, but this part is crucial for my presentation, so I apologize for this little technical introduction. This figure is actually better to illustrate Hjelmslev's model. It is somehow artificial, and it is not very exact, but I took it from this paper by Zingale from 2016. And I have chosen it because I think it is very illustrative. in that, it corresponds to the original de Saussure sign model because it has the notorious oval shape divided by this horizontal line into two parts, which are expression and content. And it is supposed to correspond to the de Saussure signifier and signified. But then you can see that it is further divided for each of expression and content part into substance and form. So that we have the substance of expression, form of expression, and we have form of the content and substance of the content. Also, what is important here is the order. So if you pay attention, we have the two forms closer to the horizontal line, while the two substances are closer like to the very circle. And this is supposed to express some kind of hierarchy. So Hjelmslevian model is hierarchical. The first hierarchy, of course, is between the two couples of terms. The first couple, expression and content, should stay on a higher level compared to the second couple, form and substance. And this is expressed in this figure. And then, according to Hjelmslev, or at least as he wrote in Prolegomena, we have another hierarchy between substance and form. And this hierarchy expresses the order of determination, so that would be that the form determines the substance. And I didn't comment on the very last part of this figure, the purport, supposed to be a semiotically amorphous method. And I think it is important to also comment on this because we shouldn't take for granted that substance is the matter, because it's not like this in Hjelmslev. He has another word for describing the let's say referent or the amorphous matter, which is outside of the very sign function. And so he used the word purport for that. So while we more or less understand what is expression and content in Hjelmslev, we can equal these two terms to signifier and signified, even if, of course, it's not very precise, but let's say we can work with this. When it comes to substance and form, it is somehow more complicated to describe what Hjelmslev meant by substance and by form. So if we want to stay in the Saussure, we could say that form is linguistic form. That would be lang for Saussure, and substance could be the parole. But of course, it is not precisely like this. And moreover, it is very complicated to imagine what he meant by substance of expression and substance of content. Because we can imagine the substance of expression is the phonological material, is the phonemes, not very articulatory or acoustic characteristics of the sounds, but rather the phonemes itself within the linguistic system. But when it comes to the substance of the content, it is already more complicated. This is Taylor's definition of the substance as the outside of the inside. And I like very much this definition. I think this is what really Hjelmslev meant by substance, to differentiate it from the purport. And yes, so my talk was inspired by Taylor's dissertation, so we will encounter more quotes from his dissertation from now on. But now I would like to comment a bit on the substance of content. So because I find this the most difficult part of the whole Hjelmslevian schema. And actually, it is not in Prolegomena that we can really understand what he meant by substance of content, but in other of his writings. This one is from La Stratification du Langage. And I have chosen this example of elephant. For those of you who knows La Stratification du Langage, you know already where I am aiming. But since this essay was not translated into English, I will try to explain a little bit. So in this part of the essay, Hjelmslev describes what is substance of content with aid of interlingual translation. So he uses the Russian word slon, meaning elephant, to describe what he means by substances of content, and to claim that actually we have more substances of content, and every specific language has its own substance of content. For instance, when it comes to the word elephant, it has a very different substance of content for the speakers of African languages or for the speakers from India. And it has a different substance of content for European speakers who mostly associate elephant with circuses or zoological gardens, etc. And moreover, Hjelmslev says that when we are defining the substance of the content, we have to bear in mind the connection to other cultural artifacts or to other cultural semiotic systems. So that means that the content of the language and its substance cannot be divided from the very culture of the language or of the speaker's community. And this is to say that every specific language is divided differently at the level of substance of the content, which he also claimed in Prolegomena. And in Prolegomena, this very claim that substance is subdivided differently in different languages by form is important for the rest of my talk. There are two observations to be made. The first one is that substance is subdivided differently. That is what was illustrated by the example of the elephant, is subdivided differently in different languages, in connection to the culture, etc. And the second observation to be made is that the substance is divided differently by form. So here you can see the very hierarchy between form and substance as expressed in Prolegomena. So this was about the substance. And now when it comes to form, how can we actually imagine the form of the content? This is, I forgot. This is another quote from Taylor's dissertation about the logocentrism. Logocentrism, according to Taylor, is rather the belief that the signified has a natural bond with the referent, and that while different signifiers are used in different languages, the signifieds to which these signifiers are correlated are the same for everyone across all cultures. Right, so when we go back to the elephant example, this is a perfect illustration of that Hjelmslev was actually not logocentric, because it corresponds to this definition of logocentrism, where we have different signifieds for different languages, and those are detached somehow from the very referent. there is no natural bond between the elephant as some kind of natural object and the way how different languages have subdivided the form of the content, which is semantics, actually. And why Hjelmslev chooses elephant is because of that he wants to say that it is not only abstract phenomena such as good, evil, morality that are approached differently in different languages and different cultures, but it is the very natural objects as trees or plants or animals. So here is another example of such a natural, a different approach to natural phenomena when it comes to the content. And this example is from Prolegomena. It is any more example to demonstrate or illustrate the substance of the content, but this time is illustrating the form. That's why we have this schema, like divided by the horizontal vertical lines. This kind of a table should represent the very form of the content. So exactly as we can imagine the form of the expression as like some schema where the phonemes are disposed, this is the same for the form of the content, where we have some semantic content. And in this example, he uses the Danish, German, and French expressions for tree or wood, or how can I translate it in English? So as you can see, the Danish word træ corresponds partially to German Baum and Holz, and it corresponds to the French arbre and not that much to the French bois, while the Danish word skof corresponds to both German Holz and Wald, and as well it corresponds to the French forêt and bois. But then the correspondence is different, and when we pass from Danish through German to French, there will somehow be some parts lost, or the correspondence is not perfect. And so here my question is how it can be that the form determines the substance if a substance is determined culturally or is not separable from cultural artifacts, as Hjelmslev stated in La Stratification du Langage. And I have another example. This one is made by myself. It is about the translation from Japanese to English and Czech. So I was inspired because one of my friends defended a PhD dissertation about this Japanese word kokoro, which is very hardly translatable into English, for instance. And so Japanese is so complicated language when we want to translate to English. So I had to add not only the horizontal lines, but also the vertical lines to cover all the semantic space of kokoro. And it simply means heart. It is very nice because also the original Japanese ideogram has this like a heart shape, but also it means mind, spirit, soul, and the related contents. And you can see that the transition from English to Czech, it's not that different, but when it comes to Japanese, we have difficulties to find the correspondences. I think that this word kokoro is so interesting, and the whole dissertation thesis of my friend was only focused on this one word, because it starts to be interesting when put into correlation with other languages, when it is in the context of intralingual translation. So my observation here is that it probably wouldn't be that interesting if we translated it in another language, not into language, but let's say some closer language to Japanese, for instance, Chinese. And this means that form of the content of a language is actually dependent upon the interlingual translation, or it is not stable, because it would be different if we put different languages here in this schema, right? So my conclusion is that the form of the content, but not only of the content, but form in general, is somehow elusive. It is ephemeral or subject to change. And so if form is elusive and subject to change, how it can actually determine the substance once again. Hjelmslev himself was interested in this question, and he expressed this very complicated relation between form and substance in his essay, Langue et Parole, where he tried to take the original Saussurean dichotomy between langue and parole and re-elaborated it into three terms, actually. So he passed from the binary opposition to some kind of triadic set of relations between a scheme, norm, and usage, where he defined scheme as pure form, norm as material form, and usage of set of habits. So this is already interesting like that he canceled simply the original binary opposition by de Saussure, meaning that the relation between form and substance is not that binaristic or exclusive. But moreover, in this essay, he also comments on the direction of the determination. And he says that actually it is the other way around. And it is that the schema is determined by norm, by the material form, which is on its part determined by usage. And usage is something which is the closest to the substance. Okay, I will try to speed up a bit. Just a very brief remark that Prieto was also very fascinated by this essay of Hjelmslev, and he dedicated the whole chapter 3 of his Pertinence et Pratique to the essay by Hjelmslev. So somehow when we read Prieto, we also get impression that it is very contradictory in Hjelmslev, his approach to substance and form. So on one hand, Prieto defined it himself as anti-substantialist, but on the other hand, he also says that when we talk about commutation, it is only seemingly that we avoid substance. So commutation is change of the substances of the one and the same form when we try to divide variants from invariants. And of course, substance is very important for commutation. So we cannot actually say that Hjelmslev is anti-substantialist at some point. And now I would like to develop on this idea of the contradictory position of Hjelmslev and go in the direction of Langue et Parole, where Hjelmslev very implicitly, but still claimed that substance can be in the dominant position towards the form. And to demonstrate this, I go once again into visual arts, because in the visual arts, it is where we very explicitly communicate through the substance. So I will show you this video installation by American artist Bill Villa. who is famous thanks to his video installations, Transmutations of Ancient Paintings. And here you can see his installation called The Greeting, which was inspired by 16th century Italian artist Tintoretto.
I'll tell you a story.
This painting by Tintoretto represents the Virgin Mary as she encounters with her cousin, and both of the women are pregnant. And the video installation was made as some kind of transmutation of this painting, but I would like to show you the commentary of the artist, of Bill Viola. I found in an interview with him because I think it's important for the topic of transmutation. It is very short.
Okay, I was sort of getting a little bit interested in the Renaissance, but not that deeply, because I was much more interested in going forward with this new medium of video and keeping going in that direction. I was in the car driving to my studio one day, and there were 3 women on the street corner, and I arrived and had to stop for the cross traffic. And so these women were just coming back from their lunch break in the afternoon. So they were walking right in front of me on the other side of the street, and it was windy. And so as they started to go across the street, the wind came up and their dresses were kind of moving, their clothes were moving as they were passing by me like this. And I was in this, of course, sealed capsule of a car, you know, so I was like the outside observer, perfect position, be looking at things. And I just watched them go across and go away. And then the light changed. And first thing I did was, when I got to the studio, I raced back, opened the door, and walked right to the book I had on Pontormo. And I opened it up, and there it was, exactly the same thing that I had seen from the Renaissance, right? Unbelievably a lot. You know, how we can see things in this world, but not really see them. But there's another part of us that sees them, but they don't see with this kind of light and this kind of eyes. They see with the inner light, which is your emotions and the part of you, the feelings. The feelings, when you see a beautiful painting, you get moved, you know, it's so deep, you know. And that's the realization I made, that I've been doing that all my life with all these pieces I was making, but I just didn't have a word for what I was doing.
So besides this final comment on the logocentrism, as he claims that he didn't have the words, but he could explain it by the visual, like moving pictures. What I find interesting in this interview with Bill Viola is that he decided to do the transmutation of the painting into the moving pictures, not because he really was doing the transmutation of the form, but what he took inspiration from was the substance, as he was describing his experience as he was in the car and observing the moving images. And then he got the inspiration, to which only after that he assigned the form, and he found out that the form is very similar to the form of the Pontormo's picture. Okay, so, oops. Going back to Hjelmslev and to the last Stratification du Langage, we can take a Hjelmslevian notion of the only substance. He defines substance, you can remember the elephant example, as having integral character of the content of a language. That means that the substance is somehow inclusive for all the languages, but moreover, it includes within it, within the very substance of the content, also the substance of expression is included. And besides that, even the form, or yes, forms both of content and expression. So this is my idea how to approach the problem of substance and form, and not to seeing them as in exclusive binary opposition, but rather in some relation of inclusion, where the substance is in the dominant position and substance is including the forms both of expression and of content. And this brings me to another theory by Hjelmslev, the participation law. Not very famous, but really interesting. So the crucial idea of this theory is that the language cannot be really limited to the binary exclusive opposition, where we have two terms in opposition, like A and non-A, but rather a language is a system of opposition, which he calls participative oppositions. And this participative opposition has the formula of A versus A plus non-A, where A plus non-A is actually the inclusive part of both A and non-A. And to illustrate this, you can imagine the two terms in opposition as term 1 and term 2, where the second term is inclusive and the term 1 is exclusive. So the fields A, B, and C are like positive, negative, and neuter. So this means that two terms entering into a participative opposition can occupy the three positions. It can be positive, negative, or neuter. For instance, the classical opposition man, woman is an example of participative opposition, because in the context of the sentence like all men are wise, you actually have the lexeme of men occupying all the three positions. It can be both men, woman, it can be also some transgender individual. But in other contexts, of course, the word man would only express the male sex. Another figure, this one is taken from the Czech linguist Miloš Dokulil. This is just to show you that a very inclusive term, A plus non-A, would occupy the whole space, the whole semantic space of both term A and A bare, which is contrary to A, and also the contradictory non-A. And there is actually no exclusive opposition, but the opposition is inclusive. That is why the inner smaller circles are included in the bigger circle, which is actually the inclusive term. And my idea is to apply this participative opposition to form and substance, so that form and substance are in the relation of participative opposition and not exclusive, and that we can say that form participates on substance, or that the substance includes form, as was already implied in La Stratification du Langage by Hjelmslev himself. But moreover, not only form participates on substance, but we can say that substance in certain contexts can determine the form, as was already implied in langue et parole, this reversed order of determination. And my last question is, what is the character of this determination of substance upon the form? So I can finally go to Taylor's black pyramid schema. It is expressing the hybrid of Peirce and Hjelmslev, and as you can see, it's very complex. So I'm only going to focus on the inner part of the scheme, where the Hjelmslevian terminology is used. And it is divided by the horizontal line into primary and secondary level. Well, on the primary level, we can see the classical action of the form upon the substance, both of the form of the signified upon the substance of the signifier and vice versa. And in the upper part, you can see the reversed order of the action of the substance upon the form. So again, of the substance of signifier upon the form of the signified and vice versa. This action of substance upon the form has attribute of being retroactive. It is a retroactive action of the substance upon the form, and it is retroactive, of course, because the primary direction, as Hjelmslev expressed in Prolegomena, is of form upon the substance. So just 2 quotes by Taylor of what it actually is, the retroactivity. And he uses this notion from Gremes and Curte's Encyclopedia of Reciprocal Presupposition. So reciprocal presupposition suggests that form may also presuppose substance. And this idea is crucial. It is this reversal of the order of priority in the presupposition that is the technical definition given for retroactivity. And another quotation, which I find very important. The major point of the Black Pyramid schema is to show how circularity between primary and secondary levels necessitates retroactivity at the secondary level. Retroactivity enacts contradiction, forcing the reassignation of signifiers to signifieds through the generation of habit change interpretants, etc. So my conclusion about the translation and transmutation, change of substance in the context of the Black Pyramid schema is that in the process of translation or transmutation, first, the substance is changed into another substance, and consequently, a new signification is created. And this new signification is created by means of retroactivity of substance upon form. And all this is possible thanks to the detachment of the sign from the object reference. And I am going to conclude with one more example from the Vienna exhibition, The Shape of Art. This one is a couple of paintings by Rembrandt, a self-portrait, and a flat portrait by Rothko. So according to the curator of the exhibition, the 2 paintings share more than just a somber palette. And of course, it is a great idea of the expression of the retroactivity of substance upon the form. Actually, I was consulting this presentation with my sister, who is an art historian, and she told me that I shouldn't be doing this. She told me this is not a good example for my presentation because it was not intentional action of the artist to transmutate the Rembrandt self-portrait, of course. It was by the action of the curator to assemble the 2 paintings together. And his choice was, to some extent, it was random, because he could have couple any other piece of art with the Rembrandt self-portrait. But once he decided for this one, and as I thought it was to some extent random or arbitrary, the new meaning was created for the scopes of the exhibition. And well, I think this is the example of the actual retroactivity of the substance upon the form. And it is an example of the non-identity of the sign with the object referent, because of course there is no shared object referent. And the very action of the curator was arbitrary, and there is no causal relation between the two paintings. In all of the examples that I used, I choose them trying to demonstrate this detachment of the sign from the object referent, as it was in the Bill Viola video presentation, because actually it was not the Virgin Mary that he depicted, but it was some random women. And it is also the case of the Japanese word kokoro, because in the interlingual translation, there is actually the referent being detached from the sign when we are translating from one language to another. So I think that I took too much time, so I will stop here, and I will just show you my references. I have some more examples, but I already told all the important part. So thank you very much, and sorry I took too long.
Yeah, don't worry about the time. It's very good. But yeah, so then we can just pass to Tyler.
That's, well, the question is brilliant presentation, of course, absolutely breathtakingly brilliant. But do we take a break? Shall we take a break? Is 7-minute break? What do you think, Didger? Or do we just keep going?
We can just keep going.
Keep going. Okay, we just keep going.